So we'll call the meeting back to order, and we have Teresa Snow with us from the Salvation Farms organization. And we have some new members, Teresa, since the last time you were with us. So we'll introduce ourselves and get started.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Behind you.
Irene, are you on?
I'm on. Irene Renner, Chittenden North, including Fairfax.
Lauren Campion, Bennington County, and Wilmington, and elected Derek also in the district.
You know him? Little guy. And I'm Bobby Starr. We've met many times. So, well, it's good to have you with us this morning. And we know you have a request in for some funds to help your organization, all the good things you do to move forward. And so maybe you can talk to us in regards to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. So I appreciate being here and all of your time and service. I'm happy to read our request and then share a little bit about what we've been doing and what we
Want to do in the future, sure.
Great. So thanks for the invitation to testify before your committee on Salvation Farms' behalf. We are formally requesting that the Senate Committee on Agriculture recommend Salvation Farms for a one-time allocation of $500,000. We've also put the same request in front of the House Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry Committee. These funds will advance Vermont's use of farm surplus crops for the short and long-term benefit of Vermont's farms and eaters, serving to build more reliability and resiliency in our state's food system. Vermont produces an abundance of nutritious crops, approximately 14.3 million pounds, that could easily feed more of our state's residents, specifically those who rely on charitable supplemental food programs or institutions like prisons and prisons, schools, hospitals. Salvation Farms gleans, which some of you may be familiar with the act of gleaning, and we support others in Vermont who glean. However, the amount of surplus that can be moved into community-based charitable food sites through gleaning is limited. These sites, like food shelves and senior meal programs, WIC programs, preschools, just like any other market, can get saturated and are limited on how much perishable food they can receive at any one time. So in response, Salvation Farms has developed strategies to use more of Vermont's surplus crops through efforts to aggregate, clean, process, package, and broker, handling crops that are at volumes or in conditions outside of the ability of gleaning efforts in their communities to use. These strategies can reach far beyond charity to serve institutions, which would be a paying market for farms. Vermont must invest in infrastructure to increase processing capacity to extend shelf life and shelf stability of our state's surplus crops. So using more of what our farms produce should be fundamental to our thinking about local resiliency and local food system development. A model surplus crop processing facility can lead to replication in Vermont and has inspired others across this nation. On behalf of Salvation Farms, I respectfully request $500,000 and one-time funding from the state of Vermont to support our organization's building of a facility to anchor and scale surplus crop processing to serve Vermont's charitable and institutional food programs. So thank you for your time and consideration.
So what you would use this money for is retrofitting or building a building or retrofitting a building to glean more products. What about, would they be packaged in a certain packaging frozen or how, tell us a little bit more about what you see as the end result of and what's in between.
So you hit the nail on the head. We're either going to be renovating or building new space. We are currently in conversations with a property owner in Johnson, looking at both the retrofitting and or available space to build new. Those conversations, are still preliminary, so we would use funds to help with everything from architect, engineer, all the design into building, and then if there's remaining funds, the start of operations. So we have done this type of work in 2 other settings. One was at the Southeast State Correctional Facility in Windsor, where we essentially tested the feasibility of bringing tons of surplus crops, predominantly potatoes, into a space where there was a labor force who helped us clean and pack this product. And those tons of potatoes were packed into 10-pound bags, put onto pallets, and then shipped out to larger charitable food organizations. The food bank being one great example and partner for moving large volumes of surplus that's been cleaned and packed. The next model that we did was based in Winooski. It was in the community where we ran a 4-month job training program for individuals in transition of the barriers to employment. But this facility allowed us to do the same kind of work, bring in large volumes of surplus crops, potatoes, winter squash, apples, carrots, clean and pack them. Apples into 5-pound bags, carrots into 3-pound bags, potatoes into 10-pound bags, put them into case packs, build pallets of produce, and then make that available to the charitable food system for larger sites that could receive hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds of case packed product. But also in this space, we made frozen food. We were producing cubed, individually cooked freeze potatoes in 4-pound bags, case packed. We were making coined carrots, applesauce, pureed winter squash, all of this to be made into a frozen product that then extends the shelf life of this perishable food. And then most of that food also went into the charitable food system. So what we've learned from the past is what we want to guide our operations and the design of this facility. And we will be aiming to handle both donated product, donated surplus from farms that could be collected through gleaning or could be a direct donation from farmers, and I should say, the purchase of surplus. If food is donated to us, it has to go into the charitable food system. If it is purchased by us, then we can own it, and then we can choose what markets we want to serve. We're most interested in our institutions.
So how did your test areas work out, like Winooski or Windsor? Was it Windsor?
Mm-hmm.
How did those work out?
They were very successful in the sense of testing the feasibility and allowing us the opportunity to refine the model. We realize there are logistical challenges. Workforce development is a bit more challenging when you're looking at production and output, but it has a different outcome than just production numbers or an additional outcome. What we found was that an incarcerated crew is incredibly productive, that they enjoy purposeful work. That's what we discovered in Winooski. And in the community setting, we discovered that as we were sharing a space with another business, we had so much capacity there, but when serving a workforce development population, there were a lot of other services that we also had to provide in addition to just production. So realizing that balance, again, of what it is we're providing our community, whether it's just handling, processing, and distribution, or whether it was developing an employable stable workforce. But what we found was that in both cases, one engaging with a state partner, the Department of Corrections, and using a borrowed space, more or less, through contract in the prison, or this shared use space that we rented in Winooski with a for-profit business, was that in order to truly respond to surplus, we need a space just dedicated for that. Because the volume, the availability, the reasons, it's extremely unpredictable. We had a sense of, because we've worked with farmers for nearly 20 years, we know what's being produced roughly at what volumes in Vermont, and when that comes available and why it might not go to market. But that doesn't mean we can predict exactly what's coming in day to day.
Brian?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Do you have a connection to schools in any way? Are you working, we have the universal school meals bill, we're trying to get more local foods into schools. Anything there?
We've worked with schools in an experiential education kind of way in our
Okay.
cleaning program, so we'll engage youth with us on farms when we collect surplus, and so engage them as volunteers. As far as providing food to schools, we've been really intentional in that we have donated a little bit of food to schools, but we want to give them things like rutabaga or celeriac and kohlrabi and
Yeah.
collards, and not potatoes, carrots, and onions, because we don't want to displace the farms feeding market. So what we see the opportunity with surplus crops is that purchase of the surplus.
Yeah.
And then the additional handling we can offer, which then makes the product one saleable to an institution if we buy it, and reduces some of the barriers that our institutions like schools face, which is labor challenges and the needs for smaller volumes. We've worked mostly on sales with the Department of Corrections because we can send larger volumes to them, and they have a labor force and they have a higher demand on daily meals at one facility compared to one school.
Thank you.
The
Brian?
potential is there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Teresa, thank you very much for the good work you're doing. The request for 500, that's sort of, in my mind, a structural kind of thing where we're gonna redo a building or construct a new one or whatever. But then there'll be operating costs later on to run that. How are you kind of looking at maintaining that? Because you mentioned it's a one-time request.
That's a great question. So Salvation Farms, for context, our current budget, operating budget for this year is just over 900,000. And majority of that money comes through philanthropic giving.
Okay.
Very little, no state funding, based funding, no federal funding.
Sign written checks.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
but you should back up and tell them how long you've been doing this.
So, well, I started the organization. It started as a pilot project when I was an employee at Peach Greens Farm in Craftsbury in 2004. We worked under the fiscal umbrella of Nova Vermont for 3 years. I actually joined the food bank as an employee for a little while, incorporating some of Salvation Farms programming into their operations, and then choosing to federally incorporate Salvation Farms in 2011. How would we maintain the operating costs? So with food, all of our gleaned product, and let me also clarify our region. We're anchored in Morrisville.
Yep.
We are a nonprofit, we're not a farm. And we want to anchor all of our models, our gleaning program, which has been replicated by multiple organizations in Vermont to inspire them in some way. Also, we've helped with gleaning programs in other areas of the country. So we anchor our model in Northeast Vermont that's serving the 4 most Northeast counties. And after piloting the aggregation, feeding, packing, and also production of frozen foods in multiple areas around Vermont, we've also decided we want to anchor that work in Vermont's 4 Northeast counties.
Okay.
Again, to prove as a model, and then we can help others replicate it in other areas of the state. So from our experience, both working with the Department of Corrections, as well as the Workforce Development and Surplus Crop Aggregation Hub we operated in Winooski, the program is incredibly marketable. And because the impacts are really diverse, it's not just about increasing food access, it's about reducing food loss, it's about relocalizing food systems which have climate change, adaptation implications, workforce development, so we would be focused on prioritizing second chance hires. So being able to tell a good story of impact through implementing our mission helps with fundraising a lot. So that would be one primary source. But outside of our gleaning work, when we handle product, cleaning it, packing it, and then facilitating the distribution of it or buying it and selling it, we generate revenue.
Okay.
And we can't sell donated product, but we can charge a fee for the service of quality assessing, packing, and delivery. So that generating revenue will be
Good answer.
Yeah, so I can see where selling to schools would put you in direct competition with farmers donating their excess products to you that they can't sell to the schools. And so there would be, I would expect some feelings there that wouldn't produce best help.
And sorry to cut you off.
No.
We really want to see Salvation Farms work as a service provider to farms. So we want to make sure that the work we do has ultimate benefit for them, whether it's increasing consumer awareness and investment in farms through volunteerism, or increasing people's understanding of what's locally seasonally available, which then allows us to feel more comfortable eating what's locally produced. But in providing any product to schools, for example, we believe the best option for that is probably the processed product, whether it's frozen and eventually dried or canned. Our institutions have limited capacity and infrastructure and labor. And the infrastructure that they do have for keeping things cold or frozen, they might not want to be putting produce in that. So how do we make some more shelf-stable product that, one, doesn't take more cost or have environmental implications to sustain its shelf life, but rather create a product that can sit on the shelf.
That's true.
So what, and I don't know the answer to this, but what percentage of, say, vegetables that are grown on the farm are what I'm going to say are perfectly fine, but not pretty?
Right.
And my terms are off and I don't know, but that's what which is a tremendous service to the farmer who has something that just isn't pretty but perfectly fine.
It's a great question. We did the first in the nation statewide study to try to quantify the amount of fresh produce that remained on Vermont's farms. And we did that back in 2016. The number, based on the estimates of farmers compared to census data, was more than 14 million pounds. And that included only vegetables and berries because no orchards responded. Also, though, from that research, we found out that it was roughly 15% of all edible food produced on farms is not making it off of the farm. That's produce. 16% of all berries, basically 15%. And there's a lot of reasons why this food loss happens on farms, and primarily it's economical. There might be competing harvests, there might not be enough available or affordable labor, they might just not have enough capacity in containers or storage, but a lot of it comes to the market. There's a lack of market, either because market is saturated or the supply chain has its own capacity issues. Much of this product doesn't meet a market's needs because it might be funny looking or imperfect. We call it naturally beautiful food.
Perfectly fine and perfectly, all the same vitamins and everything, just.
But it takes more labor. It doesn't have as quite the market appeal because how consumers have been conditioned to spend their money. But we also don't have the middle processor. So a lot of this might be even slightly compromised in quality. So think of a butternut squash that has just a little soft spot. Farmer cannot put that in a box and send that to market. But that's a large percent of winter squash that could be easily processed. So the market is somewhat inadequate as well to absorb.
Irene's better.
Irene, you have a question?
Yes, please. Two questions, actually. One is about labor. I know there's a labor shortage everywhere in every industry. How do you plan to staff a facility if you build one?
Wonderful question. So, and without getting ahead of, and without getting.
We need that cat here in this room.
I mean, sorry.
Without getting ahead of myself or Salvation Farms process with the partner in which we're, how do I say this? The landowner where we're thinking about placing a building, renovating or placing, they have connections to a nonprofit in the Lamoille County that serves substance misuse and provides diverse support services for recovery. Housing in addition to programming, in addition to employment. And so our hope would be that there's some sort of collaboration that we could aspire that helps move some of those individuals through their programming into our operations through employment. Again, I think second chance hires will make securing labor perhaps a little easier in the sense that some of our history has included workforce development for individuals recently released, convicted on violent crimes. And a lot of employers and even workforce development programs don't provide services directly to those populations due to risk, but perceived a real risk. So having our operations doors and employment open to people who don't have a lot of doors open to them, I think will help us fill our labor needs. And kind of to that point, I also think that whether we decide a workforce development program or just a philosophy of second chance hiring, we would want to continue developing our relationships with employers who would even be happy to have us serve as a stepping stone for them. So, for example, in our training program that was based in Winooski, we had people move on to Ben & Jerry's, to Rhino Foods, and other type of.
So they work well enough so you can recommend them for these other employment services.
Yeah, and that's another way we think that our mission through managing surplus helps build a more resilient, reliable food system. We're not just looking at one area, a short term, let's move this food so there's just food access, but how do we do this in a way that really builds the food system's capacity?
And what kind of a distribution service do you hire somebody to do that or team up with other folks that do food distributions, or how does that all work?
It's a great question. So we've always been inspired by leveraging available resources that exist that we can use to make this happen. That does create some more logistical challenges, but our hauling partner since 2012 has been Black River Produce.
Oh,
They they've gone through several ownership changes, so we have to reestablish that relationship and if it'll financially work for us. But all of the while working in the correctional facility, working in Winooski, they were our hauler that picked up from farms, delivered to us, and then we transport the product to wherever we distribute it to. As far as distribution reach, again, it's going to depend on whether it's charitable or purchased product. And what that volume and what the demanding market is to really determine the reach of that distribution. I think if we're going to continue serving prisons, then that would be statewide. Charitable would be statewide. Historically, we've moved product charitably to Boston and then once as far as West Virginia. And then for schools, we would probably focus locally, meaning like Lamoille County, Northeast, until we really get our systems in order.
And Irene, you have another question?
I do. Due to the seasonal nature of what I think of as gleaning, can you use a building year round, or could you share a building with some other business that, you know, say is busier during the holidays doing whatever they do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our busiest crop, how to say this, our heavy crop volume actually historically has occurred October through April. We have a lull in like March into July. As our farms build in Vermont their capacity for their own infrastructure and storage, they're producing more and more that they can store. And as they store product post-harvest, clean and pack and distribute to markets throughout the winter, they're culling product the entire time. Then that generates product for our programs, in addition to some other organizations in Vermont that are doing some similar work. It's going to be that peak field season or the traditional thinking of gleaning in the field, the highly perishable crops from August through October. Now we've been gleaning into December, which is crazy, but you know, August through October are peak months, and those are the more highly perishable crops. So something like tomatoes is certainly a product we would need increased processing capacity of. I'm trying to think if you asked another question, Senator.
Sharing the building?
Sharing the building. So we've tried that, and we've done frozen food production in I think 5 different facilities, locations around Vermont. We're currently doing frozen food production in a partnership with the Vermont Studio Center. We're looking at renting kitchen space at the Vermont Food Venture Center in Hardwick to start to scale our frozen food production until we have an anchor space of our own.
So that didn't work too good sharing space, or it did, but you've outgrown your welcome because you're sharing, taking too much of the time?
I think it's the unpredictable nature of what's available at what volume and what condition that demands a space that can be available when it's needed. And I think having a space dedicated for this purpose and solely for this purpose means that we won't have those barriers to bring in product as long as we have the labor. So.
And did you tell us how much product you're projecting to run through? I know you talked about 1 million pounds, but is that, what are you projecting to run through the facility?
Our historic numbers, and I'm pulling these from the recesses of my brain, annually, whether it was at the correctional facility or Winooski, were probably between 150 to 200,000 pounds. It's just a chunk of what's really available.
You could do more if you had the right setup.
And I think it's hard to truly know the opportunity until we have the space and the space available. You know, I think our base projection is a £250,000 per year, predominantly of those hard crops that don't necessarily need processing, that have some of their own shelf life, think potatoes, apples, winter squash, carrots. But then the space would allow us to bring in that other product that's more perishable processing.
Have you looked around the given area where you'd like to do this? Are there any state buildings that are available, like at Johnson College or
It's a really good.
anything like that? Because we have a good, Vermont has an excellent track record of buying high and selling low. So, you know,
We knew that was coming.
we might be able to find you a building fairly reasonable if the state owned it, because I don't know if there's anything there
Yeah,
that would work.
yeah, it's an interesting idea. We have not, but you know, I don't know if you're aware of any buildings that you could suggest that we look at. We.
How close would it have to be to you if you're in Morrisville?
Well, they want to do it.
She wants
We want to do it in
Johnson.
Johnson.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Right now, that's the location we're considering. I think actually our biggest concern is transportation issue, the rural nature of our region and how that's the labor concern we actually have, is people getting to and from
Well, I
work.
think the chair's idea of at least reaching out to Johnson, because maybe there's also some labor force there that would want to, you know, who knows? Get students involved in the curriculum, you know, I don't know. Could be interesting.
Yeah, we've heard discussions over the last couple of years or 4 years that the state colleges are downsizing
Yeah.
to, you know, to meet their needs, and they have buildings that they've been utilizing that are sitting around.
And this matches, I mean, if you're going to Johnson, it's kind of cool to have, I think, this place on campus, this center, this you know, it could be interesting. Maybe it, you know, matches up with some of the curriculum, I don't know.
I think the same people you're talking about, potential labor that you highlighted, might have some place that might be available to a conversation with them might be good.
So yeah, we're currently looking at the old Parker and Stearns.
Yep, That's
property.
exactly. They're using some of that for, to sell, appliances that are revamped, and they have a store there, but they certainly aren't using all of the space. And I'm not sure what's happening to the old lumber mill next door.
So, yeah, I think, you know, if that's an area where Black River can arrive at, and there's some type of a loading dock or, you know, but first thing, I guess, is to try to round up some money. And, you know, if you talked a little bit about quick freeze and then you mentioned canning. Have you tried any of that canning to see what would be involved in putting in a canning process?
No, we've, I would say, done very little research. I think what we need to really look at is what volume of what crops are available that could be suitable for canning. And then determine if we could create a safely canned product. And I'm thinking like traditional cans, not glass jars.
Yeah,
And then what does a canning line look like? And again, I think that that's suitable food for our schools and our prisons that would
Yeah.
be shelf stable. So We do have a desire to do more research that could be multi-year research, so we could get clearer about what crops are available, either still in the field or post-harvest, meaning the farmers already picked them. And for what reason, and be looking at this year over year, because every year right now is extremely different for farmers. Because then it can either confirm our thinking about the availability of tomatoes and winter squash and kale and potatoes and carrots, or it could just also somewhat disprove what we're thinking as far as a specific crop and its availability. That makes me think. Somebody, Senator Rushman, you had asked about like why surplus or how much surplus is available. Through our study, I was quite surprised by was what the farmers predicted was available post-harvest, meaning they had already picked the product.
Yeah.
They estimated 68% of all of the food picked that they don't sell, or sorry, edible food remaining on their farm that doesn't go to market is already picked, 68%. And I think that's in part because when they leave the field, they don't quite fully know everything that's there, and side shoots of broccoli doesn't fit their market, the crown does, so they don't realize, oh, that's still edible food in our world, as it is in their world, but it's not for their market. But to think of that volume of food on our state's farms actually already being picked and just ready, more or less sitting on docks. Incredible projection.
That's a big percentage. It's
Yeah.
Very
Good thing seeds are cheap.
It's
Well, you know, it helps everybody. It's farmer. If that all just is waste.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you know, the more that the farmer can cut down on their waste, the more profitable it makes everybody.
You pay them a little bit for the surplus, or do they donate it, or how's that?
It depends on what market we believe can use the product. So if we know that there's enough demand in the charitable food shed, then we would receive the product as donation. If we believe that we have a paying market or the ability to make it into a product that has a paying market, then we would buy the product from the farm. So, and also to kind of to the point of, I think that infrastructure like this actually starts to equip Vermont to handle more of the food that it produces, regardless of whether it's surplus or not. And if what we want to do is build capacity to feed ourselves more locally and to develop markets both in state and out of state, we need to have more facilities like this, whether it's imperfect, in quality or appearance, or whether it's
Do you, for the farmer, estimate the value of the product if it's a donation for them? So, for example, they might be able to, if they did have a product, give a charitable donation.
Yes. So all of the food that is donated to us, whether it's direct from the farmer to a hub like this, or whether it's through our gleaning program where we have staff go to the farm with volunteers, all of that food is tracked. We have very detailed record keeping that we know every crop, every pound of every crop from its source on what date it was collected. And we generate tax reports annually for the farms that literally say, on this day, we collected this crop at this volume. And then it summarizes their annual total so that then they can claim their own value. We don't tell them what the monetary value is. They know better than we do. And then they can use that for a federal tax deduction. We do have our own means of trying to place an economic value on the crops that we handle through donation. And last year, just our gleaning program alone handled 65,000 pounds, which is nearly 200,000 servings of produce, and it had an economic value of over $100,000.
So it's real food. I mean, you're really getting a lot of poundage. So you'd like to be in the central Lamoille County area?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think for the purpose of this facility and the amount of attention it will demand, it's likely best to be close to our main office, which is, and our main locations, which are more so.
yeah, so you keep track of things. Yeah,
I think they've tried to move around the state already.
well, you get too far removed from the office and it's rough. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'm sorry if I missed this. So you're not, at this point, you don't have any drawings, you haven't taken those steps yet to what a building would look like
It's a good question. Not for this iteration.
for this iteration?
So when we were at the correctional facility,
Yes,
the plan was to stay there and we started a campaign to raise funds to renovate what was the old sawmill building at Southeast State. And we have blueprint designs from an engineer architect who's hired by BGS, paid by Salvation Farms. So we have those blueprints. And then in the space that we occupied in Winooski, it was pretty turnkey, but we did do some renovations. We actually engaged the same engineer architect who was hired by BGS when we were working at the prison to help do some blueprint sketches of the space that we renovated in Winooski. So while we don't have sketches for this facility, we have
You have
two
an idea.
previous
Yeah,
facilities
yeah,
that we
yeah.
modified or designed.
So how big a building do you think would be adequate for what you wanna do?
We're probably in the 5,000 square foot range.
It's a pretty good size facility.
So we envision then having possibly two coolers, incoming and outgoing, so to keep dirty separate from clean. At least one walk-in freezer, blast freezer, processing space. So we're at this point, it would just be kitchen infrastructure. And then there would be space that would serve as, if you've ever visited a farm, like the wash pack house of a farm, where they have different cleaning, washing, packing equipment. Then there would, of course, be office space, break room, classroom.
Yeah, 50 by 100, that's a pretty good size. Yeah. Well, are there other questions? Irene, anything? No? Well, we'll talk about your requests and hopefully, I know I talked with the chair of the House side and I know they're interested in getting this, well, I think they're gonna basically do what we could do or might do is send a letter to a pro supporting the request. And, yeah, so you're familiar then working with buildings and grounds or,
Yeah, when we were at Southeast State, we worked directly with the staff that were there and responsible for that facility. And then our direct contact at the administrative building was Merle Miller. I'm not sure if he's still employed, but he's a fabulous individual that worked with in that process.
well, very good. It would be maybe helpful, not only to yourself, but also for us, if you do find a state building that might fit your needs, it would be good. We have two people on our committee that also serve on the institutions committee, which deals with all the state buildings and then we got 1.5 people in here that serve on appropriations.
You aren't that sure.
But anyways, we're pretty rounded, the way we're divided up, because we all serve on 2 committees. So, and Richie and I are both on both, so, that might help.
If you behave yourself.
Two others. No, that's great, Teresa, and it's good to get a, a good understanding of what you're doing and what you've done. And you've got a pretty good track record, I would say.
And
And,
really good track record. And I think in the other two, most President Windsor, that just, that's nothing that's your fault.
Right.
I did listen to Melissa say when she was there,
yeah,
and it was a great site and everything. The world in the last few years has been upside down.
and it's good that you've done this research and trials and because now you've got something to move forward with that you've worked on and got a good history, so.
I would think for anybody that's raising vegetables, if we can take that 15% number and create some value on it, it helps
It's really,
a huge.
did you have anything else that you'd like to ask us?
I don't think so. I was gonna just.
Do your damn job.
Well, I did, thank you, and for giving this request consideration. It's taken me as founder, executive director of this organization a long time to know how to make a request to the legislature. So I really appreciate you taking it seriously and considering the impact that this would have on the state, not just on your constituents, but on all of the state. To the last point, kind of these pilots, we have, different operating systems that were designed in support with Ben and Jerry's and their training team. We have a full curriculum around workforce development. So it's not just also the infrastructure, it's like all of the other elements of the learning we did. So, but thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks for your
Thanks for
time,
coming in.
all the work you've done.
Makes a difference.
No, it's very good. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, let me know if you have any questions after.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's how you work at these places. How would we know each other?
Well, I lived in Craftsbury when Pete was getting going, and maybe not.
I worked for Pete's in 2001 through 4.
Yeah, maybe as a farmer's market. So
I was his first driver.
really,
Yes,
Oh,
and I
that's
think
great.
that somewhat inspired this work, but everybody, when I walked in to hand them this produce, the
Yes.
farm's produce, they were so excited, and I thought, wow.
Yeah.
like, and how do you teach people about food? You give them an experience, farms, you give them an experience that makes them really excited and
Yeah.
engages them. And,
yeah, I remember when it first started showing up at places like Lily's, and it was amazing. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
She's not gonna market your chickens yet.
Maybe if we get into proteins, bone broth,
Rob, yeah.
and cold dairy animals, there's.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
that'd be interesting
yeah, that is.
to see, if you had a little production place.
Yeah.
Quite a positive effect on the whole operation. But our chair is ill. She won't be back till Friday, I bet.
No, she won't, it'll be next week.
Yeah, I thought Dick was gonna be back. He said he's.
No, he said yesterday,
Feels awful.
he was really not feeling well. I think Andy Birchler said but he tested positive like 3 days before Jane. So I think he was hoping he would
Thank
be
you.
back.
Makes it hard. Yeah, it seems strange to come in the morning and not
Yeah.
stop in committee and visit. with
Thank you.
Jane.
Thanks.
Thank
Great to see you.
Bye.
Thanks a
Keep
million.
up the good
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So, You guys an institution, do you keep track of buildings that are available?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. So I will certainly ask Russ.
See, the state colleges
Yeah.
are really owned by the state.
Yeah.
But before they can get rid of any buildings, I think they have to work with the state.
Oh, really?
I don't think they can just up and get
We'll find out for you.
Yeah, and you don't do money for private buildings, I don't think.
No.
And so we'd have to deal with the folks to get that squared away. But we've got, Teresa, and we've got the DMC money that we gotta
What's
send
CMC
down.
again?
The dairy.
Oh, right, yes, I'm sorry.
Earlier
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
We got both of those issues that we gotta deal with down there, as well as the issue on the organic goods. So, and that's heavy money there, unless we figure out something else for them.
I was surprised, I mean, I was pleased that I didn't know that we had the largest percentage of organic
Yeah.
in the country,
In the country, but they're dropping,
right?
and we can't afford to lose many more, to have that mass
Yeah.
that you really need to make an operation work. Morrison's already trucking all over the state to service them with feed and stuff, and you get spread out too far, it makes it uneconomical.
And for all of it, I remember going to the place in Winooski, and it's a carrot with
Yeah.
a big piece of growth on the
Something.
side. And it was
Oh,
all carrot,
Yeah.
but because it isn't all straight, they
Right.
don't
Yeah,
want it
yeah.
in, and
Yeah.
it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll,
Yeah.
we'll call it a day and we'll